Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Apocalypto, starring basically nobody I know of from other movies and directed by Mel Gibson. Now, I remember going to theaters for this on the edge of my seat like it was scaring the hell out of me. And these trailers actually, before I saw the movie, I in theaters back in 2006, I remember being or was it 2008? I don't whatever, but the bottom line is this movie the trailers for this movie scared the hell out of me, especially the way how it sounded too. I mean, Jesus, it was so gripping. Let's see if the movie's gripping. Let's get into it. We open in a jungle where a chase sequence begins with some jungle hunters led by a jaguar paw chasing a pig of some kind, as that thing is fast as it's running until they catch it and eats its body parts. For example, the heart, which is given to Smoke Frog, the liver for Curl Nose, Cocoa Leaf, the ears, and for Blunted, the character that everybody seems to tease a lot, the ball sack, which is fucking disgusting as they play a joke and on Blunted throughout the movie as he eats the nutsack and gets sick over it as Jaguar Paw tells them they're useless and tries to beat his ass up. And by his, I'm talking about Jaguar Paw. And as a joke, it's not funny. And this scene is fucking graphic, but that's where director Mel Gibson's mind goes sometimes. And the cinematography is great to watch as the leader of named Flint Sky jokes with Blunted to rub something on his nuts when he tries to make a child from his wife and getting the grandmother off his ass. And that's again, or actually not a grandmother, but more like his mother in law. But again, not funny, as these motherfuckers pull off some of the cruelest jokes, as it's only the beginning, as they get encountered by other jungle people as they ask them to pass, and the leader, Flint Sky, lets them pass. And I like the characters, despite they have a terrible sense of humor in the beginning, but they grow on me throughout the movie. The jungle people get back home in their village. I'm just gonna call them the villagers. Like, what the fuck am I calling them jungle people for? That sounds so disrespectful. And we learn more about the characters, who the characters are, as the actors are mostly unknown, but they do good. They do a good job at being themselves while speaking Mayan, I think is what it is. While Blunted bumps into his wife's mother and begs him to make a baby out of his daughter. Oh, God. As she causes a scene when people laugh, which is really funny in a haha kind of way, as she sits there and refuses to move and tells them to get busy, while Jaguar Paw, who's the protagonist of this movie, and as well as his wife Seven and son Turtles run, and an upcoming child named Tapir. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Please forgive me. As Blunted uses the flowers on his sex, as his dick is on fire. Well, not literally, but like they feel it on the inside, if that makes sense. And that can hurt like a motherfucker, as he puts it out with water, and Flint Sky, as well as everyone else, laughs while Blunted is embarrassed. And again, that was cruel. But I like the village, or yeah, the villagers, as it looks like a nice place to live in, as this is a beautiful looking movie with a great vision by director Mel Gibson. Nighttime comes and they dance as someone tells a story about a man who approaches the jungle area. And next morning comes as Jaguar Paw dreams of a man giving him his heart, and he says, "Run," and hears the doggy barking while his wife says, "Please kill the dog," until unexpected visitors arrive, excuse me, and do so for his wife. While the death was off screen, I'll forgive it. As the other men, I'm going to call the Raiders, which is what they're called for the rest of the movie. For the rest of the show, that's what I'm going to call them. But that's what they call them on IMDb for reasons I'll never get. But, anyways, they show up and attack the village and grab the children like rubber things, which is fucked up, while Jaguar Paw puts his wife and son in a hole. And, excuse me, Seven and Turtles run, where the Raiders won't be able to find them as they capture the men, including Jaguar Paw, and kill Flint Sky, who happens to be Jaguar Paw's father. And this scene was brutal to watch, as was most of this movie. Jaguar Paw meets Middle Eye as he wants to kill Jaguar Paw until his father Zero Wolf stops him, and like I said a second ago, kills Flint Sky, but slitting his throat, and The violence in this movie was realistic, and the Raiders take Jaguar Paw, while Middle Eye calls him almost for because he's like almost killing him and all that. But I'm going to call him Jaguar Paw for the rest of the show, as the Raiders take advantage of the women, and Blunted calls these assholes cowards for that reason alone, and they're taken as slaves, or maybe I noticed the mother-in-law was kind of taken that way, as they don't want the children, they want the men. And like I said, take advantage of the women, as Middle Eye looks for Jaguar Paw's wife Seven in Son Turtle's run. And this film grabs you by the throat and never lets go, like Mel Gibson said in an interview that I've heard before, which is true in this movie, as this is fucking intense from start to finish, which is a good description by director Mel Gibson himself. The Raiders take the heroes of the movie, or the villagers, excuse me, to their Mayan city while they burn their village down, as well as kill the women by the end of it, while Seven and Turtles Run will stay in the hole, for almost the entire fucking movie, as they're giving every villager a scar on them, as the children try to follow their fathers, and the other children go to another village for protection as someone falls, and Jaguar Paw helps him up, while they want the villager to get up on his own while they go on the river. As the kids continue following them, while we go back and forth with Seven and Turtles Run, as Turtles Run gets stitched up like on ants. I think that's what that was. And one man gets sacrificed into the river, and I can't help but feel bad for them, as that was effective. And this movie was effective in so many levels. Zero Wolf asks what happened to one of them, and explains how weak he was, and his son, what the fuck was his name? Whatever. As he walks away and continue to move on for the rest of the night, as they talk about how the apocalypse is coming, because remember, this movie's called Apocalypto, and based on an interview I've heard, Mel Gibson does describe the word as Apocalypto as something like apocalypse, where something has to come to an end in order for a new beginning. But I'm not talking about that right now. And Jaguar Paw says, please don't rain. And the next day comes, and they're traveling while a tree breaks down, and encounter a little girl who has the sickness and tells her to get back. The soldiers do, or raiders, whatever. But she doesn't listen and torments the raiders by saying she knows how they'll die and the sacred time is near them, as they shouldn't awaken the jaguar, as it'll scratch them out. And that little girl comes off menacing, and I like that scene, as it scared me for the dialogue as well as the trailer and in this movie. They get closer to the Mayan city, while Jaguar Paul asks for the raiders, talking them as they later on go to a place that I swear to God I thought was a pyramid, like in Egypt, for example. As we get some haunting shots during these scenes, like in the blue makeup, looks great, but it feels like Mel Gibson had some blue paint left out from the set of Braveheart. And so far, this movie is not as good as Braveheart, but it's, in my opinion, better than The Man Without a Face, and it's definitely better than The Passion of the Christ. And if that sequel comes out, I'm so fucking nervous about seeing it, as it riots goes on, as the raiders let the mother-in-law of Blunted go, as Blunted watches as she's elderly and is unfortunately useless. They get to a palace where they have some built-up pyramid, where they sacrifice bodies by chopping their heads off, and as well as throwing their bodies, which is a disturbing scene, until an eclipse lets the others they didn't kill off go, including Jaguar Paw, as he was so close to death it scared the shit out of me, as that was effective. They put Jaguar Paw and others on exile, as a few of them get killed, until Jaguar Paw kills the other guard, and gets into the forest and runs for his life. And this point in the movie is turning into an intense chase movie. And that I wonder whether Jaguar Paw will survive the rest of the movie or not, as that's super effective. The raiders go after Jaguar Paw as he climbs up a tree and hides from the raiders, while encounters a jaguar cub as well as its mother, and the raiders realized he's hiding on a tree somewhere, as Middle Eye looks for him, while Jaguar Paw is being chased by not only the jaguar but Middle Eye. And the raiders, as Jaguar Paul leads the Jaguar to eat Middle Eye as he does, or the actual Jaguar does, and attacks the Raiders, and they kill the Jaguar. Poor thing. And Jaguar Paw coming back to the village, and Zero Wolf wants to go after Jaguar Paw, and I'm getting scared for the character Jaguar Paw because, yeah, he's been the character we've been following for this entire movie. They continue the chase for Jaguar Paw while Seven and Turtles Run see a creature attacking another as it was a jaguar fight, as it falls into the hole. And Seven kills it off, and the next day comes as Jaguar Paw gets closer to home while the Raiders are still chasing him, as one is bitten by a snake and gets its venom as he dies. And Jaguar Paw is almost killed by the Raiders and jumps off a river as he explains who he is and will do anything to survive, as one of the Raiders say, just let him go. But he gets killed by Zero Wolf as they jump down with him. And I thought, just leave the motherfucker alone, as the chase goes on for a bit too long. And this is kind of a long movie at 2 hours and 19 minutes, as that's my only nitpick for the movie. Jaguar Paw gets sucked in by quick mud almost, and is almost dead until he gets out of it by pulling on a rope of some kind and getting to a beehive thrown at the Raiders, while Seven and Turtles Run, trying to find a way out of the hole as they climb and falls down as Jaguar Paw gets closer to his village and sets his booby traps for the Raiders and fights off against Zero Wolf with a scar on his head while killing off Zero Wolf. And that was a great, brutal fight scene. The rain begins as Jaguar Paw gets closer to the hole in his village, and the Raiders see Seven and Turtles Run for the first time while Seven is given birth, and fights one more Raider as he falls for the trap in the beginning of the movie when they trap the pig-looking thing and the baby gets born while they're still in the hole. And Jaguar Paw gets the last of the Raiders killed by some pilgrims on a beach. Yes, they run to a beach and then they see pilgrims coming to them, and reunites with Seven and Turtles Run as well as their new baby. And they see the pilgrims and they decide to make a new beginning. And that makes sense because of the movie being called Apocalypto, based on Mel Gibson's definition. And the climax was good, as this isn't as good as Braveheart. But did I like the movie? Let's talk about it in a rating, shall we? I'll give this movie a 7.7 out of 10. Better than The Man Without a Face and The Passion of the Christ, but not as good as Braveheart in my opinion. And director Mel Gibson makes these characters likable, as they come off rather cruel at first, but they'll grow on me for the rest of the movie. And the cinematography is great to watch, as this is a beautiful looking movie that follows jungle people quite well, despite none of this is in English. And the village looks like a nice place to live in until it gets attacked a day later, which will kick off the plot 25 minutes into the movie. And I like the idea of Mel Gibson telling a story of jungle people and the apocalypse mixed together, as well as this is supposed to be a road chase movie, even though it's not set in the streets or whatever. Some of the movie was brutal to watch at times, as that's director Mel Gibson's sick mind, as it's graphic for damn sure, as the violence was realistic in this movie, and it was a pretty good chase survival story, as some of the shots are haunting. But don't get me wrong, because overall the movie looks great. I like that how we focus on the villagers versus the Raiders, and the makeup looks great while the villagers were marked blue in one scene. And I was thinking, did Mel Gibson have some leftover blue paint from Braveheart? Because it looks like it. But don't get me wrong, this is a recommendation for this movie, and it was a good story, as it was well shot, and this movie was absolutely well made, and the shots were great, haunting at times too throughout the movie. But at the end of the day, it was a pretty good movie. As people say it's a masterpiece, so far I prefer Braveheart, as that was so far Mel Gibson's masterpiece, but we'll see how Hacksaw Ridge does next time, and his new movie Flight Risk. So I would like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time we'll be back with Hacksaw Ridge. And until then, the end is coming. Not.